Good afternoon. Welcome to the Getty Center on this beautiful March 1st sunny afternoon. We're so glad for you to join us for today's program, Creator Creation with Harmonia Rosales. My name is Greg Sandoval. I am of the Getty Museum Talk programs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's program. Today's conversation complements our current exhibition, Beginnings, the Story of Creation in the Middle Ages, which is currently on view in the North Pavilion here at the Getty Center through April 19th. For those of you who are here, the galleries will be open today until 6:30, I believe. So we hope that you haven't had a chance to see the work, will be able to enjoy it after today's program. A few notes just as we get started. For guests here in the auditorium, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. We appreciate your presence, and we want everyone else to enjoy the program uninterrupted. For our online attendees, closed captioning has been enabled, so you can access that by clicking the CC icon on your Zoom menu bar at the bottom of the screen. And at the end of the conversation, for both online and in person, we will be able to take questions. For people here in the auditorium, we will have visitor services associates walking the aisles with microphones. So we just ask you, please raise your hand and please ask a question into the microphone so that everyone can hear the question, including our panelists today. And for those of you who are online, please drop your questions in the Q&A function on the Zoom menu option. After today's program, for people who are in attendance, there will be a book signing with Harmonia in the auditorium lobby just outside of this space. Her book, Chronicles of Ori, an African epic, will be available for purchase. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our Getty co-curators, Larisa Grollemond and Beth Morrison. They will be joining Harmonia to talk about her influence of medieval imagery on her work and how her process leads paintings to challenge, complicate, and reframe historic works. Please join me in welcoming them.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. Larisa and I are the co-curators of the Beginning show, and we are absolutely honored to have our visiting artist with us here today for a conversation. We're really looking forward to exploring the exhibition a little bit more with Harmonia, and we're just thrilled to be hosting her paintings here at the Getty. We're going to do a brief sort of introduction to the show. I hope some of you have had a chance to go see it or will have a chance to go see it afterwards. And then we're going to converse. We have some questions for each other. And then at the end, we'll leave some time for questions both from the live audience and online. So to move us forward, just to say that this show about the creation is a strength in our collection. The story, the Christian story of creation specifically, is one that is often told in our manuscripts. I think everyone is interested in origins, from people looking into genealogy to thinking about the Big Bang. All of these kinds of origin stories are very important for us to help define who we are and our place in the world. Our collection of manuscripts is largely a collection of Christian medieval manuscripts, but Larisa and I also did include a few works in the exhibition that are non-Christian to look at other kinds of origin stories, and one of those other kinds of traditions that we'll be talking about today can be seen in Harmonia's paintings. But first, I'm going to turn it over to Larisa to give you a little introduction to some of our manuscripts.
Sure. As Beth said, creation stories are one of the most commonly illuminated kinds of stories that we have in the collection. They really appear in a variety of different kinds of books from the medieval period. And across centuries and across cultures. So we're looking here at two manuscripts, one from 13th century Italy, from Bologna, the Abbey Bible from our collection, as well as a Armenian book that was made in Isfahan, what was then Persia, in the 17th century. So you can see some similarities between these, the use of roundels to really structure the narrative. So in the Abbey Bible, the creation stories are actually running vertically down that page, and they intersect here with scenes from the life of Christ. And they intersect at the moment where the Word becomes flesh at the Annunciation. And so creation stories don't just appear in Bibles as an illustration to the text, but they are really capturing the kind of heart of Christian narrative. And so here, thinking about the what we call the Old Testament and the New Testament kind of simultaneously happening on this page of Genesis, of course, at the very beginning of the Bible. And in the Armenian book, you can also see that similar use of roundels to kind of structure the page, with the largest part of the page in the center given over to the story of Adam and Eve, which we will also talk about plenty today, as it's an interest of Harmonia's as well. So just to give you a sense of what these medieval stories look like throughout time and space in the medieval world.
This next object is one of the great masterpieces of our collection. It's called the Stammheim Missal. It's from the 12th century. I think it looks pretty good for a manuscript that's almost 1,000 years old. This page tells the story of creation. You can see that again, as Larisa talked about, it's structured by roundels. Medieval artists enjoyed using roundels to tell the story of creation because it gives that sense of cyclical renewal, life, all those kinds of aspects of never-ending creation. So the creation story starts in the upper left with the vision of light from darkness, and then goes around in a circular fashion until you get into the middle, which is where you have Adam and Eve. So the page really puts humanity at the center of the creation story, surrounded by more of the kind of cosmological aspects of creation. And this is actually one of the objects that we first showed to Harmonia when we were talking about doing this exhibition. Larisa and I had found Harmonia's works a few years ago, and we were so inspired that we wanted to feature them at some point in the galleries. And the story of creation and Adam and Eve, as we'll see, seemed to be a really good match for the kinds of stories she was trying to tell. We were attracted to her works because of the kind of visual language that she uses that is very medieval and Renaissance, using the same kinds of stories that we all know so well, but giving them a completely new twist that makes you look both at the medieval artworks and her own artworks more closely. So when we showed her this, that was going to be kind of the prime object in the exhibition, she got pretty inspired and actually created her own work, which is featured in the exhibition as well.
Yes, so I was absolutely thrilled that you wanted my work to be seen. I mean, I was like, thank God. No pun intended there, but it was, I loved it because I really truly felt seen, by such an amazing institution here, this museum. And yes, I was very inspired by it. I mean, you have to see the manuscripts up close in person. I mean, these images don't do it justice. The detail, the beauty in it is absolutely fascinating. But what I really love is how they're trying to explain something so complex in an understandable way. But I also saw some differences. So I see that it's very kind of very structured, very neat of how we like to understand things. The 7 days of creation, right? That one day this happened, the other day this happened. And I saw that as a stark contrast to African cosmology, which is kind of just more so leaning towards the Big Bang Theory, and how everything happens all at once and time doesn't really exist like that. And so I was like, all right, I'm inspired by this. And I want to take on the great feat of trying to contextualize this abstract moment of creation of Earth, and how was I going to do that? And so I was like, I'm going to lean back towards my cultural background, and let's talk about the supreme gods. So if you think of the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, those supremes, I'm thinking of it as the creators of Earth, and they don't have gender, but taking a page from the medieval manuscripts, I'm going to give them that in order for us to understand these creators, because we are iterations of nature, and in nature you need a female energy and male energy to create something. And so you have this, what I love is that the understanding of nature is our relation to nature. With the, and I pronounce it all the time wrong, Stammheim missile? Stammheim missile, is that we elevate ourselves as humans, and we put ourselves on a pedestal. When I'm trying to bring back the relationship to nature and the importance of it, the importance of the water we drink and the different things that grow from it that we consume. And so first I was like, all right, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, what are those? Well, that's the sun. We need the sun for anything to grow, to live. And then we have the female aspect of existence, and that's Oduwa, right? And if we think about the Big Bang Theory, she is hydrogen. And then I'm thinking, okay, the male aspect, he carries those seeds of life, and his name is Olodumare. And they come, and so you'll see him at the bottom. And they come together and they create Earth. And in the center is Mama Oneli. And depending on where you're at in the world, Mother Nature. And that's the spirit of her in the center. And I'm always relating it back to us. And when you create anything, and me being a parent, you have a child, they take something from you, and you're always consistently nurturing them. So Oduwa transforms into the ocean, and she nurtures Earth. And then you have Olodumare, and he fragments himself into the 4,000 plus African gods, or Orishas, as I call them, as guardians of that earth. So you'll see them kind of there on the corners, left and right, bottom corners. And then what I realized is I like to bring back certain things that were demonized in the African cosmologies, and that's the snake. The snake is very powerful. It signifies transformation. And we, as in Earth, consistently transform. We need that transformation in order to create movement. And you'll see that, that mirrored image that's on each side of Mother Nature. You have the lush lands, and then you have it being desolate. Causing migration, causing that transformation of the land. And then you have the two sources that we need to live, which is the water and the things that come up from earth. And then back to that snake, I had to shape it in something that we all understand, which is the Ouroboros, which is constant movement, constant transformation, that constant cycle. Yeah.
I think you guys are going to be thrilled when you see it in the gallery if you haven't already. It is absolutely spectacular, and the way that Larisa and I worked with the designers is that you walk into the exhibition, you see the Stammheim missile, and then you're prepared for this moment of revelation to see Harmonia's work when you cross and go behind the wall, and then it's like, whoa!
That's a little bit of a spoiler alert for those of you who haven't been in the gallery yet.
I can tell you, you guys did a beautiful job curating it. It's such a balance when you go in there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, and thank to our designers.
Yeah. So as Beth said, this kind of center of the Stammheim missile is that moment of the creation of humanity, and the story in Genesis, of course, is that Eve is created from the rib of Adam to be his helper. But of course, that's another spoiler alert for those of you who haven't read Genesis. One of the most common images that we have in, again, a whole variety of books is the moment of temptation and fall and original sin. So here, this is a 15th century book of hours, so this is a private devotional book, not a Bible. And the artist has taken a little bit of liberty here with the story of the original sin. So you can see the tree of knowledge at the center, Adam and Eve on either side, and here the serpent has been given the head of a woman. And they are conspiring, she and Eve, to bring down to cause the downfall of humanity. Ladies be talking, as we know. So this is a little bit of a, again, artistic license, but it is one of these images that I think is really interesting to us as medievalists because it encapsulates so much of medieval culture as well, kind of medieval socio-cultural ideas about the nature of women and the nature of sin itself. And of course, medieval misogyny is in a lot of images, but it's very obvious in this one. But again, it's a very complex theological image. So here the tree of knowledge forms the cross of Christ, which you can see at the top of the image. Again, bringing that idea of Christ as the redeemer of humanity, or the redeemer of that original sin, into this idea all in one relatively small image. So as Harmonia said, these are really complex images, but they're really fascinating as well as when we start to kind of tear them apart a little bit and really analyze them. So another of the paintings that we have from Harmonia in the show is her vision of Adam and Eve, and I will give it over to you to talk about this.
Yeah, so in Yoruba understanding of creation and origins, it is so entwined in Christianity and in Greek mythology that I didn't want to, I don't know where the stories stop and end or where it really actually began. So I love to reimagine them with our history, the African diaspora history, within these stories. So I wanted to, when I thought about entwining these stories and reinterpreting them, I wanted to think beyond what the story actually was. You know, like the female form, the female figure was the fall of humanity and all those kind of things. I was like, I could do that. I could create this feminine aspect of it, but it has been done before. I mean, I've even done it before. And I wanted to change the story up, and I had to think about it. I was like, all right, let me move away from this male-female thing. Let me talk about conformity and manipulation and control. And in a lot of my work, just like the medieval artists, I use a lot of symbology. So the strangler fig is that antagonist. It's that manipulation. It's that control. It's a parasite in a garden of Eden because it grows from the top down. It needs a host in order to survive. How it grows is a bird eats its fruit, it poops on the branch, and the vines works its ways down till the roots of the host tree, essentially strangling it. And when it reaches the soil, it digs into the earth, and it takes the tree's nutrients, and the tree dies. And once it's dead, it blossoms fruit for the next. And that is not only to talk about manipulation control, but how it can really silence your identity, and how one can, if they don't know who they are, can pass it on to the next generation. And it's that constant cycle. And you'll also notice the patterns in the background. So that pattern is a beautiful gilded cage. You know, sometimes we're caught in the smoke and mirrors. And when we think about conformities, oftentimes we choose it because it's the much easier path to go by. I mean, you know, you make friends fast. And that whole decision is also influenced in or represented in the double-headed snake right up above. And I like to depict this strangler fig, not in a realistic form. It's more insidious. It's more, it's larger. The fruits, the fig fruits are larger, and they're very tempting to eat. And you'll also see the differences in the age range. So Eve is younger, and Adam is older. And if you see in her hand, she does bite the fruit, because it's easier to manipulate and indoctrinate a younger generation than it is an older. Yeah.
Great. We were really thrilled to pair these two works of art in the gallery because, as you can see, they have a lot of visual overlap with the placement of the figures and the tree in the middle. And I really loved hearing Harmonia talk about the strangler fig as a manipulation going up the tree, because in the medieval work, you can see the snake does the exact same thing as manipulation, sort of wrapping around that tree. So there are a lot of really interesting visual correspondences between the works. And like I said, I think it helps when you hear Harmonia's interpretation, it makes you think differently about the medieval work as well. So I love the fact that, like, we're in conversation, but so are the artworks. This is another work that's featured in the gallery showing the creation of Eve. This is one of our most recent acquisitions in the department. It's a text by Giovanni Boccaccio called Concerning Famous Women. And of course, the very first famous woman was Eve herself. Boccaccio's interpretation of famous women is often famous women doing bad things. And we're really thrilled to have Harmonia's work in the gallery that sort of serves as an antidote to that kind of look at the history of women and Eve in particular, which brings us to probably my personal favorite. This was the work that drew me to Harmonia's oeuvre in general. And I just love this. We're so thrilled to have it in the gallery. And I think that your interpretation of Eve works really well with the medieval side of the interpretation of Eve in terms of what it means for women of the past, present, and future.
Yeah. And I thought about it. I wanted again to to really transform the story. So what did Eve mean to me? Eve, how was I going to reimagine Eve? Well, she was going to be the mother to the diaspora. She was going to be that matriarch. And you'll see a lot of my work using halos. But they're not really halos. They are an ori. They are a map of your destined path. And you'll see here, if you zoom up on that ori, the different major events that shaped it, her destiny, or her life that ultimately created us here. So you'll see at the very top, you'll see the birth, and then you'll see that snake again, and that's changing from innocence to knowledge, growth. Then you'll see the manipulation and control that she encounters, and then you'll have the crossing of the Atlantic and being sold and death. And then you'll see that one circle being obscured by her figure. And that's to show you, because a lot of my work is not just to speak to other cultures, but also to us. It's my work, I want to offer healing as well. And so by her obscuring that, it's breaking a cycle. She is breaking that cycle of pain, of that survival mode. Her eyes are closed to remind us that she is holding that space for the future generation to fly and to imagine greatness, and don't create that greatness from the pain.
I think one of the things that really moved us about this was something Larisa pointed out one time in your gallery, is that this is one of the only portraits of Eve I can think of where there's no men at all, and I really appreciate that.
Yes, I mean, of course.
Yeah, you can talk for that.
Yeah. So we love Eve as an empowerer into the future. So that just gives you a brief overview of the exhibition of Harmonia's works, about how they interact and are in conversation with the medieval works, which I think deepens an understanding of both. And now we devised a few questions just to kind of get the conversation going. And I know that Harmonia has some questions for us as well. But maybe Larisa, you'd like to begin.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we've spoken about this kind of as we've moved through, but What about kind of historical modes of representation appeal to you? You work in this really historical kind of mode using some historical techniques, so you learn the hard way about gold leaf, like medieval artists did. But is there something about working in this really figural, really representational mode that appeals to you and what you're trying to say?
Yeah. Figurative work is powerful. There's power in it, in the visual aspect. And even through my understanding of medieval and Renaissance, which I have adapted the style, it's because here's the importance of it, especially returning back to that old, more traditional way of painting, is because medieval artwork, and this is aside from my artist enthusiasm of the detail and the beauty of it, and just the skill itself, but it was, for all intents and purposes, really created to indoctrinate. So it was created to teach the illiterate theology through the visual imagery, as you know. And it really defined at the very beginning who was divine, who was chosen, who was saved. And Black bodies were never really present. I mean, unless you want to talk about the exotic-sized Balthasar, you know, the one figure, we weren't seen. And then we roll into the Renaissance age, right? And they create depth. And again, the skill, amazing. But they really defined what they thought was beautiful, and that was whiteness. It whitewashed history, it whitewashed mythology, it beautified colonization. And Black bodies, although painted, were always seen in some sort of servitude, in labor, in enslavement. And in that way, these two things, like, we were never central. We were always peripheral. And so these tools, I should say, that helped indoctrinate us as society, the styles, what I'm doing is I'm taking those tools. I'm utilizing those tools and I'm reimagining them, flipping it on its head, redirecting it. And it's because both of these styles of work had been so powerful, I mean, powerful enough to shape a society's belief system, that I still like my heart of hearts, really believe that it can reshape it now. And that is through figurative. And I think I know modern age right now, contemporary artwork, it's like we want to do abstract, but I think that we don't have enough of our Black figures in greatness, I don't think there'll ever be enough of it. But then that leads me to you. You, however, Beth, I am fascinated because we were talking today. You 30 years with the manuscripts. Mm-hmm. And I know, Larisa, I watch the Getty Instagram page, and you make it sound so interesting and fun to learn and bring back that interest in them. But, like, what interested you guys in medieval work?
Well, I was very fortunate that I found medieval work when I was quite young. I was privileged to go to a very good school in Kansas City, Missouri. And when I was 15, the wife of the principal started to teach an art history class. And we started with cave paintings, like everyone does. And we got to the Middle Ages, and I was 15 years old, and I just knew that that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I was very fortunate to make that dream come true.
Wow.
Very straightforward story. I started here at the Getty 30 years ago when child labor laws were much more lenient than they are now. It has been a wonderful journey. And then we were able to welcome Larisa into the department.
Almost 10 years ago.
10 years ago now, yeah.
I found the Middle Ages through Renaissance fairs. I was a medieval nerd as a kid. I think I found the Middle Ages through popular culture, and it was something that always interested me, the overlap of fantasy, of history, and getting to work with medieval objects, I think, is a really interesting thing, because books are objects. Books are meant to be held, touched, seen, smelled. In the Middle Ages, sometimes tasted. That's a little bit.
We don't do that.
But they're really intimate objects, and they are such a connection, I think, to the ideas and beliefs and kind of lives of people of the past, that I find them really endlessly fascinating for that reason. But I also think it's so important to show them to people. And one of the reasons I think that both Beth and I are here at a public-facing institution is to bring them to people in a different way. And I think something that speaks to me about your work and in conversation with the manuscripts is that it makes these things present, because these are not just things from the 15th century, from the 12th century, but they are objects that exist today for us now. And they have something to tell us, not just about the past, but about how we relate to them in the present. And I think your work is so great to have with the manuscripts for that reason, because it activates the medieval, I think, for people who might not think that the medieval is for them, who maybe don't think that they can relate to the medieval as well. And that's one of the reasons I was so struck, I think, by your work, kind of bringing in this idea of the representation of Black figures in these really recognizable or canonical iconographic positions, because people walk into the gallery and immediately know the Adam and Eve. Like, they don't need a lot of background. But then I think your work invites them to reinterpret it in this really fascinating way.
And I think that in terms of the topic of this particular exhibition, as Larisa was saying, the creation is one of the most commonly shown types of imagery in medieval manuscripts, but I think it helps us all to think about our own origins, because I think thinking about our own origins helps us to make sense of the world.
Absolutely.
And so I was wondering, in terms of, obviously your work involves many different types of mythologies, but you do seem particularly attracted, as medieval artists were, to origins, either the creation, Adam and Eve. Why did that sort of subject matter in particular appeal to you?
Because origin stories are infrastructure. These stories, as we know it as a society, are the blueprints of how we define morality, gender, sexuality, Adam and Eve, right? Before we even have a full consciousness. And so when I reimagine it with a history, my background, my cultural history, I'm not like attacking these stories or saying it's wrong. I like to think I'm more entering in it. I'm posing more of, especially with this exhibition, a question mark on who determines origin stories. What happens when you place an origin story next to the very thing that had silenced them? What does that make you feel? That's the question.
And I think that's exactly why we wanted to welcome your artworks into this space, is to challenge people and to make them think
Yes.
about what the world means to them, what origin stories mean to them, how it helps them to make sense of the world, and to make room for other kinds of stories.
Yes. Yep.
Well, I mean, the sort of dominant narratives of, I think, the Western art historical canon are, as you've described, white and really repetitive in a way. Like, there are moments of artistic intervention or creation, of course, with individual scenes and individual approaches, but the narratives that are created kind of across hundreds of years, centuries, come to be repeated so much that we forget that they're constructs, that they're accepted in those kind of canonical ways. And your work, I think, invites people to question those dominant narratives. Is that something that you're hoping audiences, what do you hope audiences walk away with after viewing your work, or what do you hope that they feel?
I hope they question the narratives that they've been fed or they've been taught in school, the school system, right? That's what I really hope. But, I mean, I will be remiss if I didn't say that I want people to walk away looking at Black bodies and that same luminescent glow, that same, that beauty, because I truly believe that seeing that visual shift really truly can, is more powerful than just representation. What it does is it creates or reshapes or defines imagination, right? Imagination really truly reshapes like how we think about ourselves, how we feel, how we define belonging. And if anything, I want visitors to walk away with recognizing that divinity isn't limited, that it was just framed that way. And if they can walk, if my work does that alone, then it's done its job.
And in terms of, the museums such as the Getty that really focus on historical European work, there are white bodies all over the museum. So what do you think it means to have these monumental Black bodies on the wall interacting in the same physical space with this sort of more traditional historic art? How does that display change the narrative, or how are you hoping it might change the narrative?
The narrative in the entirety of
just museologically.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to try to have these kinds of works of art in a museum that is historically so centered on white Europeans?
Well, monumentality in European work really signifies divinity and authority. So when I paint Black figures in that same divinity, authority, empire, I feel I'm using that same visual language. And because I understand, I don't want to just create images or Black figures for spectacle purposes or to take up space, because its representation isn't just about being seen, right? It's how we're seen. And museums, I understand, is where cultures, various cultures come to see what another culture monumentalizes, right? And so I'm creating figures in real history, with real history, with real empire, and to create that dialogue, because I refuse for us, the African diaspora, to be defined by just stories of survival and surviving oppression, and just taking up space, but really have historical dialogue around it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to the big questions really fast, but I wanted to go back a little bit to technique. We started to talk a little bit about this, and I just wanted to make sure that people saw it. So you've discussed a little bit with us about how your techniques are evolving and the kinds of things that you've taken a little bit from medieval and Renaissance artists. Your use of gold leaf, of course, is one of those things. Can you talk a little bit about your process and your approach to not just laying out big panels, but also laying in this texture and the gold and all of the things that you use.
Yeah, I wanted to go beyond like using just the old master techniques. You know, I mean, I do enjoy the old master techniques because it creates like a richness. It's time spent. I knew I couldn't create paintings if I wanted to be in museums to cheapify it, if that's even a word. It had to be real gold. Gold shines like really beautifully. And I had to do it just the way they did. It was just in my brain that it had to be created in that same love, in that same time as these old master works. But I also like to experiment, like I did with this one. This one, I'm not sure you can kind of see it through the photograph, but if you do visit the exhibition, you'll see that it has a 3D effect, bas relief, he said.
Yeah, bas relief.
Even though it has an S in the end, you know?
The French.
But I really built it, the snake out of clay, because when you showed me the manuscripts and I was inspired, I wanted to create a piece for the show. I had visited the Boston Public Library and fell in love with John Singer Sargent's work. And he used a lot of bas relief. And I was like, you know what? I don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna figure it out. And I experimented on this very piece right here. And so I do like to use that. I also like to use iron oxide. Iron oxide mimics not only the parts of the African soil and the high iron content, but it creates texture. I didn't want anything to just be kind of flat. It has to, for me, I enjoy the, it's what makes it different from, I don't know, AI art, you know, from posters, from is to see that texture in it and create that almost like a movement in a way.
And in terms, I was hoping maybe you could even take us through this piece a little bit about what your working methodology is. Do you sketch it out in lead point? When do you apply the colors? When is the gold leaf? All those pieces.
I definitely don't. That's the one technique I don't I don't do as the old masters do, which is like very accurately sketch prior. And I think it could be a little bit of laziness. Also, my brain works a mile a minute and my hand doesn't work as fast.
I think we call it creativity.
Yeah, creativity. I like that. And so I don't do really, I don't sketch it. However, I'm finding myself having to sketch, but I still don't do a detailed sketch. And the reason is because, and this is probably why school can be good, art school, is I'm constantly experimenting on the piece. I'm figuring it out by trial and error and taking back steps. And so what I realize is I try to paint first and then gild, and then the little thin sheets of gold always sticks to the oil, and it messes everything up. And then I have to backtrack. And so I'm learning to sketch it first in a way so I can just gild it and apply the iron oxide and then go back in and paint as I need to. So yeah, I just literally sketch right on. I don't do sketches. And I guess this is another reason being self-taught, I kind of just work with how I'm comfortable with. And so I'm all about energy. Energy is what drives me. Intuition is what drives me to create my work. And I paint directly, like I paint from the heart, pure love. So when I'm creating these pieces, I understand that sketches have a lot of energy in it. It's your first idea. And it holds this movement and energy. And what artists do is they take that sketch and then they copy it. You know, they make it, and the work, I feel, loses its that energy. And so I wanted to keep all that energy in that painting because you can feel it. And so I was like, I'm just gonna sketch right on it. And I was saying this earlier is I try to eliminate fear in my artwork, whether it's to utilize a new technique. I want to have complete freedom in creation. And I don't want to be scared because I feel like I can't do something. So that's why I also experiment right on there. I'm gonna make it work. I sometimes create figures, and this is maybe a message to artists in here. I could create figures and spend weeks on it, hours, and then sit with it and realize, you know what, that figure, I don't need it in there, and I'll wipe it out. And I do it because I refuse to make something work if it doesn't work. It's gotta go. And so that's my process.
Amazing. I mean, we have some of your smaller work, I would say, in the show. So you usually work really large, and I'm always in awe of kind of seeing things in progress that you do, because you're constantly reworking, and it's wonderful to see. Should we take some questions? Or?
Yeah, I mean, do you have any questions for us?
Yes. What do you feel when you walk into the exhibition, when you see the work compared to the manuscripts that I know that I love too, that we love so much?
I guess I just feel gratitude. I feel gratitude for you to share these works with us and with our visitors. I feel very privileged that the majority of people who come into our gallery have never seen a medieval manuscript before. And when I'm trying to put together an exhibition, I think Larisa and I talk with this, it's like, this is my chance. This is my chance to share how cool these objects are. And I think elevating them by having your works present with them in discussion, I just feel gratitude.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I think there's a little bit of it's like disbelief almost, that not only are we able to kind of show people things that we love, manuscripts of course, but that the storytelling traditions are not dead, that they are alive, and that the objects are being reinterpreted in this really socially responsible way, that I think makes them so present and so relevant for people walking into the gallery, and maybe they're not sure what they're going to see, and it's a little bit surprising. So it's a little bit of like, I don't even know what that feeling is, just like waiting for someone to turn the corner and like get an eye full of your work, and to spend maybe a little bit more time in the gallery than they otherwise would. And so I think it's a little bit of, I don't know, like satisfaction is not quite the right word, but it's a real, I think, reinterpretation of the works and a reorientation of the gallery in a way that feels really exciting. So.
And I think that it's really been wonderful for us. We've been spending a lot of time in the gallery, giving a lot of tours. We keep getting so many requests for tours, which is awesome. But just seeing people really interact with the artworks in a different way. And we were up giving a tour, I don't know, some random person, I don't remember who it was. And there was this young guy in the gallery, and he was like, this is fascinating stuff. We were talking about the Adam and Eve, and he's like, do you mind if I listen in? We're like, no, that's what we're here for. And when we were leaving the gallery after the tour was over, he was like, wait a second, who are you guys? And we're like, well, you know, we're the curators of the show. And he's like, you guys put this together? We're like, yeah. And he said, can I just tell you, I feel seen. And that was just really
we were like, are you a
meaningful to
plant?
us. I know, exactly.
Did someone pay you to say that?
To make us feel good. But it has been really amazing to see the reaction of visitors in the gallery, because it is something different than what we have done in the past. And that we are always trying to reinvent our own gallery and reinvigorate these stories in the way that Larisa said, because as she said, all art is present. I mean, that manuscript was made 1,000 years ago, but whoever comes in and looks at it brings today with them into whatever they're seeing.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel the weight of responsibility? Because I understand that museums, I mean, they don't just hold things, right? I mean, they're storytellers. I mean, you contextualize work, you create a story and a flow throughout the entire museum. You work with the other creators and curators in the other departments, but you also answer to a board. And so you guys really shape the culture, really. And so you define what is beautiful, what is important, and what is worthy. And do you feel that responsibility as curators?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think, the past, I would say 5 or 10 years in museums has been a really interesting one because there has been, I think, an increased expectation on museums to be social spaces and spaces of social change, especially. And I think the collecting patterns, the existing collections have been questioned and opened up in new ways. And I think the interesting thing about being at a museum now is not just our local audience, our audience that comes to LA, but we are also an online space. We have a digital audience that's global. And so thinking about how best to not just serve those publics, but give voice to them and give something for everyone in a way that seems too sort of flat in a way, but that I think it is the responsibility of museums to not just steward the collections that we have, but to tell stories using our collections that feel relevant and important socially today. And I think that's difficult with a collection of historical, primarily European art. And I think one of our primary challenges is making that collection work in different ways for a 21st century audience in LA.
And I think that the sense of responsibility has changed a lot in the 30 years that I've even been here. Like when I first came here and you were putting together a show, it was your responsibility to like tell people what they should be looking at. You've spent all these years learning it. Like, how do I tell people what they should be looking at? And I think that's completely changed in 30 years. And now we understand that it's not our responsibility to tell you what you should be looking at, but to open a dialogue. That it has to be a two-way street between what the visitors are bringing as their lived experience to the gallery and how we can help them connect with our art by addressing that lived experience. And I think that's a huge change that we've been through.
It's a conversation rather than a lecture.
Exactly. So we should probably open it up to questions. I think they're going to bring up the lights. We'd ask you to wait after you raise your hand to get the microphone, just so that people online can hear. And so while they're bringing those around, think of your questions, and I'll start with one online. Here is one. How does this exhibit relate to your book, The Chronicles of Ori, on African mythology?
How does this well, it speaks about the origins. And there is overarching narratives within it, and that's conformity. Even, I think of conformity as wearing a mask. So in the Adam and Eve, speaking about that is, that's what the African gods had to do. They had to wear the mask of Christian saints and hide within it. And even when it comes to Eve, in relation to the book, she is a character. She encompasses our ancestors. She is the migration of our people. And so these concepts are heavily in the book through metaphors and symbols. And when you approach reading this book, because it doesn't just include the African mythology, the stories that I grew up with, but the entire history of how these African gods became colonized, you need to understand that the book is stylized in a way like Ovid's Metamorphosis. And I did it that way because I want it to consistently being read over and over again. I hit Easter eggs for it to be analyzed, for it to be studied and in the educational system, because overall, my mission as an artist is to situate our origin stories beyond the docks, and position Black bodies in divinity. And everything that stems from that, whether it's the book, whether it's a public sculpture, everything stems from that particular message.
Great. Why don't we take a question from the left-hand side here? Go ahead.
Hi. Thanks so much for this talk. This was super illuminating. I am just wondering, we're talking a lot about origin stories and creation. I was wondering if there was a particular moment in your artistic kind of journey that served as a catalyst for kind of meshing these historic techniques and the subject matter you work with. If you remember a specific moment that was really inspiring to you, and then also if you remember the first work that you did, that you produced, that kind of meshed these two things together, or if that has been, you know, a really long-term process that's evolved over years and years.
What brought what two together?
Kind of this old masters artistic technique and medieval references, and then also the subject matter that you're infusing it with.
It wasn't a moment, it was a realization. So I started off painting stories I knew because I wanted to show that, hey, we have stories too that are similar. And I didn't get into history. I mean, I never really liked history through the educational system because, I mean, it was flat, right? It was something you memorized. It wasn't something you questioned. So, I mean, if you think about, now that I think about it, I'm thinking about it in real time right now, is that learning throughout my entire youth, it was celebrating America's greatness that was pedestaled on the backs of the indigenous and the enslaved. And so that didn't quite interest me. I mean, it proved in my grades. So when I wanted to go beyond the paintings and I wanted to really understand how these gods were silent and why we don't even study them in school, we don't even hear about them, they're not even compared to the Greek stories, I was like, let me dive deeper into a history and understand that, oh my God, there's different versions of history. We've been fed and indoctrinated in one particular perspective. And so that whole thing of wanting me to expand and understand why they've become silent interested me in the historical context. And then now understanding how artwork was used to indoctrinate and manipulate. I mean, even both history and religion has been weaponized. And so I want to really reframe that. I want to show that, hey, this is what's happening, and this is what's important. I actually find out that history and independent research has become more important than me actually painting on the canvas.
Mm-hmm. All right, do we have a question on the right-hand side, perhaps? Someone's coming with it.
Thank you. Congratulations to the three of you, two of you for curating it and you for making it happen. I have two quick questions. Why figs? And I saw, usually in the paradigm and the Catholic school where I learned, and after that, opening up to the sun and the moon, related to the moon to the woman and the sun to the man, I saw in your painting that it's inverted. Like, one more, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying why?
I just want to know your perspective on why.
Oh, why I visually depict, why I have the sun behind Oduwa, the female, and the moon behind the, well,
and
because.
Why figs and not apples, as I learned in school? That's your perspective.
Because I'm thinking of something more grander. I'm thinking about the aspects that give us existence, that make us live. I mean, without the sun, we wouldn't have, we wouldn't be here. Without that impact, whatever that was, whether it was the Big Bang Theory, however you want to believe it, that brought us here. I mean, I wanted to show kind of like more of the grandness in creation, that we are really what, maybe even less than 1% of Earth's history, humanity is. But that's why I wanted to include the Son, because I'm thinking of the three. If you think of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, that's what I wanted to kind of create, those supremes. I included the moon because that's a reference to the creations of night and day. So I was like, he needs a crown too. So let me just have the sun illuminate, the moon behind him.
Mm-hmm. And she asked about figs versus apples.
Oh, figs versus apples, because in history, the figs came first. And later on, it turned into apples. So I was like, let me go to where it originated from, the fig, because the fig leaf always covered Adam and Eve. And so I was like, let me just stick to figs. But by choosing that and by understanding that history, it led me to that strangler fig symbology, and which it wouldn't have been there without understanding what kind of came first, in the storytelling.
And another question from online. As you continue to expand in future works, do you see equal potential for reclamation of our stories in other art historical periods, Baroque, Neoclassical, Romantic, or even outside the Western canon entirely? I know you work in Baroque.
I do.
We don't happen to have any of the works here, but
I take all of them because they all define something. And they all have shaped our society as we know it. So depending on what I'm painting, depends on what kind of I'm feeling. Do I need more drama? Do I need more Baroque in there? Do I need more beauty? So it's like, it's that. I mix it all together. And you said, what was the question? Does it?
Maybe even outside the Western canon entirely.
I'm probably moving there, yeah. But the reason why I love to utilize this is because this is how we understand stories. This is what was shown to us. This is our foundation of America. And so what I'm trying to do is address that and to have a dialogue with it using those same, tools that they used to describe a different story that does stem from West Africa and all around the parts. And I do understand that on the continent, these stories are told differently. They're understood differently. But since I'm not speaking to the ones who already know. I'm speaking to the diaspora that don't know. It's a way to understand it and fast track learning about these African gods and their history.
Great. And my iPad tells me we have time for one more question. So maybe we'll go back to the left-hand side over here.
Harmonia, I do have a question. I can't stop thinking about your choice to make Eve younger than Adam. And as a black woman who's a PK, a pastor's kid, I think for centuries the fall has been read as feminine weakness. Mm-hmm. But you replace gender with age, with vulnerability to systems of power. And for me, that rewrites the entire moral architecture of the story. How conscious was that shift? And given that you've described medieval art as a tool built to indoctrinate those images, does your Eve become not just a character in the story, but a portrait of what happens when a system gets to manipulate and target young women?
Yeah. I think you kind of answered it. I mean, yes, absolutely. But my work also, and it always stems from my own experience of masking under conformity, of finding my way back to my identity, and understanding that throughout certain religions, that males are always dominant. All those kind of things plays into it. My personal life goes into my artwork. But you literally hit it on the head. You said everything. I don't even need to reiterate what you said because it was beautifully said. But yes, to all of it.
So on behalf of all three of us, I thank you for joining us today. We're going to go up to take Harmonia to sign some books. But thank you very much.
Thank you.